Welcome to Cape Breton Movers and Shakers, where we have conversations with people who are doing interesting things here in Cape Breton. I'm Richard Lorway, president of goCapeBreton.com, and today I'm talking with Darren Gallop and Laird Wilton, co-founders of Securicy Data Solutions in Sydney, Nova Scotia. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello, Richard.
So what is Securicy and what does it do?
We are an application software that helps businesses build information security and privacy programs in their businesses so that they can sell into enterprise or government organizations, and generally in highly regulated markets.
Right. So how did you two get together and come up with this idea?
So in my last company at Mercado, as we started growing and going up market into larger festivals, we started working with some of the assets of Disney and AG and Live Nation, and that's where we encountered third-party vendor security audits and reviews, which customers would do on us to make sure that we met the security standards of their organization before they shared high degrees of confidential data within our application. So that's how we got introduced to the problem from a sales perspective, or from our customers' perspective. That forced us to really learn a lot about data security and data privacy, not only general practices, but also as it pertains to a software company ourselves. So those learnings and that adventure of sort of growing the business into meeting those requirements for our customers, opened up and sort of shed some light on a business opportunity where we were starting to see trends of that type of vendor due diligence and aligning very well with the increase in cybercrime around the world. It was clear to us that there was a big opportunity to help other businesses build the sophistication they need, both technically and otherwise, in their businesses to operate within the new emerging rules and regulations and within the growing bar of expectation that most larger customers have on their vendors.
Definitely a really significant challenge in the previous company, right? As Darren had mentioned, as we start to work with these larger organizations like Disney in that previous company, right? And ultimately turned into a really great opportunity for us to build a company that's helping companies just like that previous SaaS company that we worked in get through these challenges with some of their bigger customers, right? So definitely a big ugly challenge that happened, but feel pretty fortunate now to have kind of come through that and kind of turn that challenge into a great opportunity for all of us, right? So
Gotcha. So in a nutshell, if you want to do business with a big company and you're a smaller or medium-sized company, whatever, and you want to enter into their ecosystem, then you have to comply with their security requirements. And compliance 100%. Is a huge issue. If you've never done it, you don't have the resources. Is that right?
100%, absolutely.
Right. So is it a little bit like an ISO process where you have to document everything and then prove you've met certain standards and that kind of thing?
Yeah, there's at the governance level of an information security program, you have policies and procedures where you've essentially documented the practices within your business, and then on top of that, there's, especially if you have a technical component to your business, then there's all kinds of practices that need to be deployed across, on the human resource side, practices that people follow, but also technically there needs to be configurations and tools in place to protect against a variety of threats. And at the end of that, there needs to be some sort of internal audit review mechanism that validates and ensures that the policies and controls and practices that you've put in place in the business are essentially enough to meet the requirements of often compliance from a perspective of meeting a various standard or regulation, but also sometimes with more sophisticated customers, if you're selling to an AWS and Amazon Web Services or somebody like that, they're also going to look very thoroughly at your practices from the perspective of risk, and even potentially dive into the precise platforms and tools you're using to make sure you're using them within the best practices from a security perspective.
Yeah, and on that one too, particularly one of the things our team works really hard on, right, is that our customers expect our customers to have a really strong understanding of all of these topics, right? So there's a huge component terms of the education component, the supporting content component, everything that's there to help our customers really learn what the expectations are and how to navigate even an ISO or other common standards out there, and then speak to their customers with authority on them, and be able to understand it in a meaningful way.
Right. So now I'm not an expert in this field, obviously you guys are, but my understanding is that there's the different jurisdictions like North America versus Europe have different standards that are requirements that have to be met. And how much overlap, how complex is that? I mean, we're all doing business all over the world these days. So if you're a customer, say in North America or in Cape Breton, and you want to do business with both North America and Europe, how do you meet those standards?
Yeah. So generally speaking, now there are some jurisdictions around the world that have specific cybersecurity standards.
Right.
But generally speaking, on the cybersecurity front, most of the world agrees and aligns with leveraging standards with industry-specific organizations. So you have things like the Center for Internet Security based in the US that has a control set of best practices and configuration baselines. You've got ISO standards like the ISO 27000 series that have a variety of standards around best practices for securing a business and various components within a business. So those standards are generally leveraged quite heavily internationally. And yeah, so in terms of overlap, yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, a lot of this stuff comes down to the foundation of the common body of knowledge, like what are the best practices. For example, most of the world would agree that multi-factor authentication is better than just using your dog's name as the password and using that same password for all
1, 2, 3 password.
So there's there's a variety of most of the standards cover a lot of this thing. There are some areas where one standard may be industry focused or may go more deeply into certain domains than others. When you start talking about it like in a national, international component, where things can get a lot more complex is in all of the rise of privacy regulations. So in Canada and our own country, we have the PIPEDA Act, which has been around for quite some time. But it's actually going through some evolution and some upgrade as well to accommodate modern times. You've got in individual provinces, a lot of the provinces have their own privacy regulation, their own privacy act, and the same thing occurs in the states. Like in the US, you have HIPAA, which is a legislation that covers healthcare data, but then you also have various states have different privacy regulations, and we're seeing a lot of states that don't have them already in the process of developing. And then overseas, there's the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which was established a couple of years ago. And that really is, in a lot of ways, really pushed the global evolution of privacy law. And you see a lot of new regulations, like Brazil's new regulation, for example. A lot of the regulations that are coming up and the changes to regulations that we're seeing, province, state, or national, international wide, seem to follow a lot of the principles and concepts that the Europe's GDPR has put in place. So yeah, they do all have their subtleties, but I would say overall there's what we would define as privacy principles that are generally fairly shared across jurisdictions. Yet, when it comes to defining what is a breach that requires legal notification, that one jurisdiction it might be a 500 user breach, and others it might be 5,000. When it comes to the timeline of when you need to notify of a breach, it could be 24 hours, could be 72 hours, could be 7 days, depending on the jurisdiction. And then how you go about the process of notification. Do you notify a regulator? Do you notify the individuals directly? Is there an order of operations or not? And so there definitely is some complexities. And the other challenge too is a lot of these regulations are new, or there's new components of the regulations. So a lot of them we're really just picking up on sort of understanding how they get interpreted in a court of law, and essentially what types of precedent information becomes available to guide people in terms of how they're going to interpret and apply various regulations and interpretations of those regulations into their business. So you could be a small 20-person SaaS company selling internationally, and as you can imagine, this becomes a very complex conversation And it's one that, if you're selling to a sophisticated customer, they're very likely going to be asking you for details about how you're complying with XYZ, whatever in their jurisdiction is, they determine to be important to them, or what they're already complying with. So yeah, it can be a lot. It can be very overwhelming, and yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem space that we're operating in right now. And of course, data privacy is more than just data security, but obviously when you're talking about data stored in a database or in an application in a web available environment, without data security, there's no data privacy. So just because you have good practices and policies, if the hacker can just go to the website, download all the stuff and dump it on the dark web, then those other practices that you're putting in your business are not really going to serve much purpose at that point.
Gotcha. Well, this is in a business to business context, I guess if I'm a small business owner, I have to figure this out. But so as an individual, right, your average consumer, I suspect, really doesn't want to think that much about security, other than to assume that whoever they're dealing with online, who they're giving their credit card information to, has somehow handled it. Is there kind of like a universal good housekeeping seal of approval that you can, like, if I'm dealing with XYZ company, how do I know if they've complied?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, we're always a lot of us are on the internet a lot. We're interacting with a variety of social media sites, other web applications, health apps, etc. I guess the first thing is just to think about what are you sharing, and I think a lot of people fail in that first piece, which is what data am I actually sharing? And a lot of people will say, "Oh, I got nothing to hide." It's like, okay, well, that's one category of things. If you had things to hide, you probably want to hide them. But then there's also the considerations of other stuff, right? Like you brought up credit card, for example. In a weird way, like I'm less concerned about my credit card being stolen than I am my identity, for example, because my credit card company has mechanisms in place and is going to protect me to a great degree against that. And I've had that happen before. It's not like the hacker gets your credit card and then racks up 20 grand worth of expenses, and then all of a sudden you're in the whole 20 grand. That's not how that works, right? There's the banks and the credit card companies have mechanisms in play. Sometimes they're not that convenient. Like I've been at dinners before, and because I'm in a different part of the world and I just bought something weird on my credit card 10 minutes ago. Now I just took oh, don't worry, guys, I got these drinks. And then sorry, sir, your card's been declined. It's like, so sometimes that backfires on us and causes more harm than good. But the credit card, what I would worry about more would be, how much data you're exposing out there for yourself and your family. And so, thinking about what the tool is and what it's capturing, take a few minutes. That most organizations should have a privacy policy. By law, in almost all jurisdictions, there's a requirement to have a privacy policy. That privacy policy is in most jurisdictions required to illustrate exactly what they collect, whom they share it with, and why they're collecting that data. Now, unfortunately, no one's going to read these things. And even as a professional, I don't have time to read, a multi-page legalese document. And generally, like the way I look at it is like I go with the lower risk profile, right? But from a practice perspective, I'm a big fan of sharing the least amount possible, and be very, very wary about just signing up for something I've never heard of. It is hard for an individual consumer to go in and do an assessment to assess whether a vendor is good. You can Google it, and certainly if it's a fraudulently or known fraudulent business, or one that have had breaches or has some sort of bad reputation, that's certainly a step you can easily take. Anytime you do that, I even do it sometimes when a phone number calls me, and I don't know that phone number and they're pretending to be somebody. Throw the phone number right into Google and you'll find a bunch of people yet talking about that number in a thread or something like that, right? Yeah. I think awareness is a big thing. Like it makes a lot of sense for the average individual to understand what is the criminal landscape, right? So we hear all these stories like the CRA phone calls that were going on. I was getting them all the time last summer, where you get a phone call, it's like, hey, it's a CRA, you owe a bunch of money, you're in trouble, like,
Yes.
stay on the
Buy
line.
gift
and,
cards.
yeah, like buy us a bunch of gift cards and
Yeah.
we'll go away. Like the CRA's changed their policy. Now we only accept iTunes account cards. I don't know. There's stuff there. I think like it's hard to do that. A couple of good practices though, like credit monitoring, great thing to do.
Yeah.
Especially if you have credit. So if you have like no credit and your like credit rating is like 150 and nobody would even give you a Canadian Tire card, probably less concerned about it because any attempt to use your identity for the purpose of gaining credit, it's probably not going to be overly lucrative. But if you have a good credit rating and you haven't overused your credit, but you have good, if you have liquidity from a credit perspective, then you're a really good target for somebody who may want to conduct identity theft for the purpose of building out profile of you and then gaining some level of credit on your behalf. So having a monitoring app, like I get an update every week where I can just see, and it's like if I see my credit rating go down, I haven't been out like shopping around for a loan or haven't missed any payments, then I know something fishy is going on, for example, right? And that could put me on a level of alert to explore it. That's one thing that I think is a good. I'm trying to think of. I spend more time talking to people about what they should do to protect their business, but when I think about the practices in my own life, that's one. Another one is monitoring for breaches. So there's a couple of different websites out there that you can use where you can give them your email address, and what they do is they have people that go shopping around the dark net, finding databases and buying databases that are being sold or databases from known breaches, and they'll cross-reference that. So then you'll get a notification that says, hey, there's been an update. Your Darren Gallop at gmail.com or whatever has been found in this breach, and then there'll be some information of when it was discovered, maybe how many individuals were involved. It may even tell you, does it have a password? Often it'll be like, here's your hash password. So they got the password, but unless they can crack the hash, which they probably can't do in the near future. I've also seen cases where, there's my login, there is in plain text my password. So, that kind of brings up another practice, which I think a lot of people are guilty of, which is using the same password for everything.
Yeah.
So don't do that because what
No.
happens is like
as easy as
I
it
can
is.
well, it's so easy. If you've been using
Yeah.
the same password or a couple of passwords for a long time, then like I can just go back and look for your email address. Well, I just got to find your personal email address. And then from there, I can go, there's tools I can use in the dark web that'll search, like we'll search a whole bunch of different data sets, and we'll find any data they have on you. So I might say, oh, in the LinkedIn breach, and here's your email, or the MySpace breach, here's your password used for that. So then I can, I can run a robotic script on a bunch of these and have them go to popular websites like Facebook and Gmail and things like that,
See if
and
it works.
attempt to access your account via those credentials. So, sharing, changing your password, not making it be like password 123, your dog's name, stuff like that, not using the same password over and over. So using like a password manager, a lot of the browsers.
It's definitely where it's at, right? I mean, because you have to think, even if it's a really good password, it can be compromised, right? In any one of these breaches. And then as Darren said, it's being used in other services, and that's a lot of times how things break through, right? Versus kind of getting into that habit of using some of the tools that are now, kind of readily available and a lot more affordable, more straightforward for people to use to manage all this, right? So
Yeah.
And then, that opens up the other one that's like multi-factor authentication is a really good thing that people should just be using on.
You should just say yes when
anything.
it's offered.
Yeah, especially things like, I see this on Facebook. I was like, oh, my Facebook account has been hacked. Well, the only way your Facebook has been hacked is either because you went somewhere and logged in and left the login there, or you don't have multi-factor authentication. That is going to be 99% of all the times. And somebody was able to do that attack that I was just describing earlier, which is I find out your email address, which is easy. LinkedIn is a great source. The whole LinkedIn database was breached a couple of years ago, so you can go get that data. There's actually there's an app on the web where I can type in Darren Gallop. I'll get the Darren Gallop. I'll get the email address, and it's being used by companies that sell like sales information and stuff like that, right? And the dark side. So it's really easy to compile this, right? So then I got the email address. I can go find, what passwords have been out there, and I go. And if you have two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, then I'm not going to get in. It's going to ask me for that other factor, and I'm going to move on. Like that's a practice, and things like, your Facebook profile. We use Facebook to log into a lot of different things using Facebook single sign-on. So when somebody takes over your Facebook account, that can be highly problematic, and it also can expose your entire friend base to potential threats as well.
Phishing,
The other one is your email account too, right? Like your email account generally by default becomes the way that you reset passwords and regain access to things that you lose access to, as well as a lot of confidential information being generally pumped through most people's email accounts.
right. So how many people in your company now? Switching tax a little bit here.
29 as of yesterday.
Yeah.
Wow. So this market opportunity you've identified and that you're, how big is it? I mean, it sounds to me as if it's huge and vast, and
it's massive.
Yeah, massive.
It's billions
Incredible.
of dollars, right?
Yeah,
And
really incredible.
it's a moving target. It's a merging target. Like, it used to be, if you go back not that long ago, there wasn't really like SaaS companies or small independent companies kind of rolled in a wild west type of like mode. And now with these regulations and the fines and the customer awareness that this is all creating. It's going to soon be the point, like right now you can go into most small businesses are a cybersecurity and privacy train wreck. I can even say that about things like doctor clinics, medical clinics. I could not to get into the specifics, but some of the stuff I witnessed walking into small businesses that I have to go to and see the practice that they have there, just completely blatant. I do think that right now the bigger target is these SaaS companies, because they scale quickly. They often do deals where they're working in an enterprise environment and instantly in one deal gaining access to a large volume of private, personally identifiable information. And so that's where the focus is from a regulatory perspective now, certainly on a fining and a prosecution perspective. But I would say that once that gets better under hand, what we're going to see is that's going to move its way down, and smaller businesses out there that are collecting and storing or processing or accessing confidential information, healthcare information, financial information.
Well, yeah, everybody stores customer information to some degree.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? Like you could even say like the hair salon that has like, a database of all their customers and their meeting times and what haircut they like. And, maybe there's an allergy information in there because that person's allergic to whatever scent or product or whatever, sort of improvising here. But, that's kind of how it can quickly escalate. And so, I think like the reality of it is cybercrime makes money. Like people are out there, the criminals are doing it because it's lucrative. And it in 2017, the estimated proceeds, this is an Interpol study, but the estimated proceeds from cybercrime passed the global illicit drug trade, right? And we've watched Pablo Escobar and Narcos and these kinds of stories, and this guy losing millions of dollars because he was so high when he buried in the woods or whatever. Like they had lots of money. These industries made lots of money, and still to this day you hear about drug busts off the coast and people risking making major risks to their life for financial gain in that business. And the reality of cybercrime is it's like drug dogs can't sniff your computer to find out if you have stolen information on it, like they can sniff your bag to find out that there's blow in it. So in a lot of ways, there's a lot more money to be made, and it's a lot easier, and there's more technology and technique to be elusive, right? Yeah.
That's an interesting analogy. So is it your plan to move towards another exit? Is that your end goal here?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
You guys looking at another exit at some point in the not too distant future?
I mean, right now, honestly, the focus is in building the biggest and best company.
The biggest thing we can possibly build.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Presumably, like most things in life, we won't want to do this forever. If the industry continues to grow as we anticipate it will, we anticipate in that there'll be lots of consolidation in the space, which could lead to a lucrative opportunity down the road. But right now, like we still consider this business to be very early stage. And we have a lot more work to do. So we're certainly not eyeing on an exit anytime in the foreseeable
Gotcha.
future right now.
So in terms of growing technology companies locally, and I know you've both been involved in this, both from a point of doing it yourself and also from mentoring other people. So what can we do better locally? What do we need to make it happen more often?
So when you say the technology companies and make it, do you mean like local tech companies?
In terms
or
of the
local companies?
ecosystem here in Cape Breton, and is there something?
And when you
that's
say to
missing?
make it missing in what way, I guess?
Well, we need more investment opportunities? Is it an HR challenge? I mean, what are your challenges?
To be totally honest and transparent, there is no regionality anymore in this space.
Yeah.
So you don't need your investment opportunity to be in Cape Breton to have an investment opportunity.
Yeah.
A very tiny amount of the investment that we've garnished to build Securicy has come from local sources. I think this was the trend the world was moving towards before COVID happened. COVID has accelerated this sort of like linear level. And so what that means is you don't have to hire, you can build a world-class company at a Cape Breton, even if, you don't need to find your VP of product in Sydney. That VP of product could be in Boston or be in Toronto. And so, that's the world we're living in now. And that means that, my opinion, what's the advantage of being here? I'd say the advantage is more of a personal nature than it is a business nature. I would have said 5 or 10 years ago that, hey, you can, it's cheaper to hire talent here than it is elsewhere. But what we're seeing happen, when it comes to certain degrees, more experienced people or things like software developers, is there's a leveling field. When all the companies sent everybody home and everybody started working at home, and then there's this residual of companies that maintain doing that, it took away the boundaries, the physical boundaries or the geographic boundaries of where people are. So, we still have most of our team in Cape Breton, but not the entire company is in Cape Breton. And at the end of the day, what we need to grow our business is the best in class people for the role. So, obviously, if we have an applicant that's local, then that's going to be our preference. But at the end of the day, we're going to hire the right person for the job. Gotcha. So then we're no longer confined to that sort of regional limitation. And investors used to really like investing close by. They used to like to spend time. They used to like to be able to, walk down the road or jump on the subway and go down and walk in. And I think there has been a move around, more globalized investing happening. But again, COVID set up a scenario where nobody was traveling for a while.
Could do it, yeah.
And at the same time,
kind of the final end of that approach, right? And
you got all these investors with a bunch of dry capital that they need to mobilize into investment opportunities. They can't sit on it or it goes away. So, all of a sudden they're pushing out of their comfort zone to start finding ways over Zoom to build relationships and build trust and confidence in entrepreneurs and businesses, so that they can actually put that capital, mobilize that capital to use, right?
I think it's really interesting and exciting conditions for people that are here in Cape Breton at the same time, right? Like to be here, to do anything from here, right? Like there is that great opportunity to be part of something from here in Cape Breton. I think there's always a real place too for early stage investment, kind of seed on ideas and like people that are willing to go for it and go to build, a world-class company. And I think now the conditions really are better than ever. And I think how founders, like I know how I think is that you got to be thinking that way out of the gates, that you're going for, being a larger, going for a larger play, going for a world-class company, like really going to break out of here in Cape Breton and make those connections out there. And it's never been easier to make them in terms of the time that I've spent in this space, and we've certainly benefited from it. And when we think about the team, when you look at it right now, 20 of the folks are here in Cape Breton, and that's amazing. And that this is a choice that those folks have made to live here. And I think about there's 9 other people that aren't here right in Cape Breton, but the option is available to them to move to a place like this, to work in a space like we do. And I think Cape Breton really shines as a potential place to live generally. And then again, you're able to access more opportunities out in the world because of the conditions that we're living in at the moment, right? And I feel very fortunate to be in those, to be in that moment, to be in this time as it's happening, right? Like I'm living here, I'm living in Glace Bay, living amongst my family, spending time with, you know, my family. That it's something you can't really, you know, put a price on, like the value of that, and able to be part of something and you know, make this huge effort to compete on a global level as well. It's incredible. So, you know,
Yeah, I would agree. I think COVID is
time, right?
made us all rethink our priorities a little bit, and
Yeah,
and if it plays into kind of your mission, what you guys are trying to do, and apparently it does, then I mean, that's fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So well, listen, I think that's a great place to end. Thanks so much for your
Awesome.
time.
That's great, because my assistant booked me back to back, and I'm 5 minutes late for an important call. So,
Yeah.
so we got to run. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah,
Tell her to call me. I'll take the heat for that.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
take care.
Speaking with Darren Gallop and Laird Wilton, co-founder of Securicy Data Solutions in Nova Scotia. And we'll see you next time on Cape Breton Movers and Shakers. Bye.